They say that Kingsley Holgate is the most travelled man in Africa. I beg to differ, especially when it comes to beer people. Today's guest has worked for many breweries in Africa and around the world. I first met Louis Peters when he came back from Tanzania and worked for Bavaria Breweries in Centurion. Let's welcome Louis Peters to the show. My name is Holger and this is Drinks World. Welcome to the show, Louis.
Thanks, Holger.
Louis, you are a beer guy. You started with SAB, hey?
That's correct, years ago, yeah.
But not in Sandton.
No, not in Sandton. I can say that, okay, although I was a rep for SAB for 2 years in South Africa, but since then, my career took me north of the borders.
Okay, so where did you start repping?
With SAB, I started at Tanzania breweries. I was fortunate enough to live in the northwest of the country in a place called Mwanza and looked after northwest Tanzania.
Was that your first job?
It was not really my first job. It was my first expat job for SAB. That was after 2 years in SAB as a sales rep. Yeah.
Where, in Durban or?
In east of Pretoria at Waltloo Depot.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just as a normal sales rep?
I was an off-premise rep. And loved it. I think that was 2 of the best years of my life. I think being a rep for a fantastic company like SAB is awesome. I was part of an amazing team, great sales manager, and a lot of the fundamentals that I apply even today came from those, were laid in those 2 years. Through that passion of SAB and the drive for excellence. It's amazing, yeah.
When I interviewed the guy from Durban Poison, one of the local brewers, he said to me, he's looking for sales reps. He's only got one criteria. They must have worked for SAB before.
Yeah, no,
because
I can understand that.
They train them properly, and they choose them properly, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so, Dan.
Yeah.
And I think what was amazing about SAB is how they generated that passion in a very short space of time. So there was that drive for excellence, extreme competition, so you had to be on top of your game to survive in SAB, and I think that's why they grew to the massive company that they were. Yeah.
And how did you get to Tanzania? Did you put up your hand?
Well, I had a passion for Africa. I hitchhiked as a student, in the early days up to Malawi. So Africa was part of a passion for me. And in my first career discussion, when my boss asked me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I said, no, I want to work in the rest of Africa. And at the time, it was unheard of. It was not really the done thing. But that little seed was there in the back of his mind. And 2 years later, somebody phoned him and said, we need somebody to develop the sales reps for SAB in Africa. And he said, I've got the guy for you. And if I was still calling on the customers, and the phone call came through and said, do you want to do sales development in Africa for SAB? And I said, yes, done deal, I'm going. And that's how I ended up. So for 2 years, Holger, I did sales development for SAB in Africa as an independent consultant. I had to resign from SAB. It's strange, but it's true. And then for 2 years, I did this in all the countries where SAB was operating at the time. And then they asked me if I wanted to join SAB again, but this time as I think it was called Market Development Manager for Northwest Tanzania, but effectively Regional Sales Manager.
So how do you train people if you don't... you got to understand the people and the cultures and that to train them or not? Is it all the same?
Well, no. I think you must be culturally sensitive. There's no doubt about that. And that's never been something I've struggled with. I tend to connect with people quickly. So that's one of my strengths. So I think that combined with my comfortableness in the rest of Africa, and my willingness to work with them in the trade and not just in the classroom. So I spent a lot of in-field time coaching sales reps. And language wasn't a real problem, not in the countries where we operated then at that time. So it was easy enough.
Okay, I think I'm going to stick my neck out here and say that it's a trait of South Africans, especially the Afrikaners, who are more African than the Africans themselves. It's like me. I'm a German, and I'm more German than the Germans in Germany. I think the Afrikaners are often more African than than Africans. We're sensitive. We love the continent, and I think we can work with people.
Yeah. No, I think I would agree with that from what I've seen.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what it means to train people or salespeople.
Well, so Holger, it's a passion for me. So I can't speak for other people, but for myself, I love seeing that growth. I think working in the rest of Africa in the early days was amazing. The people I've worked with had very or no exposure, to development at all. So the appreciation was just unbelievable, and the rate of growth in skills development or skills competence was a phenomenal, and for me that I got intense satisfaction from seeing guys go from rep level to sales manager to some of them director level, so it is in a relatively short space of time, and I knew that I had a little bit of that was due to me, not all, but that at least I helped to get the base right, and I have an amazing network of people still in Africa, that we keep regular contact. So it's great. Yeah.
So how do you rep in a country like? I've never been to Tanzania, but do you get into a company car and start calling on outlets?
The basics are the same. Olga, if calling is not, calling is not even negotiable. You need to stick to your call schedule. Make sure you've got the right one. So once that is sorted out. And you stick to your call schedule, then the rest of sales is not difficult. It's availability, pricing, make sure quality is right, and that your price is right. So if you've got those things in place, then, you're halfway, battle is halfway won, and then you follow that up with, correct consumer interaction. And then I think, the rest will fall into place. In the theory is not difficult. It's the practice and the discipline to enforce that's the difference between a good rep and a bad rep, So, and I think that's, if we stick to that and get that in place first, then the rest will fall in place.
Well, tell us a little bit about the country, Tanzania.
Oh, what?
Or the beer in Tanzania.
Yeah. Okay, but the country is just, it's God's gift to the world. Let me tell you that for free.
There's a place called Serengeti.
Yes, I was fortunate enough to have the Serengeti as part of my area. So you can imagine on Friday afternoons, I would say to my wife, it's time to go and visit the lodges in the Serengeti again, make sure availability is right. And then we would get in the Land Rover and drive to the Serengeti. No, I was very fortunate, Olga, that I looked after a pristine area. Northwest Tanzania at the time was very undeveloped. It's got two of the Great Lakes of Africa, Lake Tanganyika and Lake Victoria. It's got the Serengeti. It borders Burundi and Rwanda, and Uganda, fantastic area. And it was underdeveloped from a beer point of view. So, it was really easy to grow volume there just by seeding wholesalers in the correct villages and making sure your supply is good. So we had just the most amazing 3.5 years in that country. Amazing challenges. Road infrastructure was poor. Trucks often got stuck in the mud in the rainy seasons. We had to distribute on ferries in Lake Victoria, to the different islands. It was an adventure. Every day was an adventure in that country. It was awesome. Yeah.
So how do you develop beer? But if I've got a lodge somewhere, obviously I want beer, and I'll find beer.
Yes.
But what do you do? Make it easier for me to find it.
Yeah, and make sure that you find my beer. That's the
okay.
So we did have the opposition. Tusker was quite big, and
you own that? Do you know?
East African breweries. Yeah.
What was your brand?
So we had a number of brands, but Safari Lager would be the big ones. Kilimanjaro, Balimi was our regional brand. Now, I said to you, relationships and availability are the bottom of the triangle of the sales driver. So, you're not in the game if it's not available. So, number one, you must make your beer available as easy as possible for the consumers and at the right price. So, and I could do that better than the opposition because we had a brewery in Mwanza. So I didn't have to travel from Nairobi down to Mwanza. So it is really just a matter of making sure that your supply routes are fine and that you can manage price at the end to the consumer, and then the rest will fall into place. So it was amazing. It was an amazing adventure.
It sounds too good to be true.
Yeah.
And why did you come back?
My contract came to an end after 3.5 years. Me and my wife then left the business because we were on contract, and came back to SA. And roughly that was when we met when I joined Bavaria Brewery.
So you joined Bavaria Breweries as this experienced guy from SAB and who'd worked all over the world.
Yeah. So that, and just by accidentally, that was the second time I had to leave SAB. So by now I've joined SAB twice and I've left them twice. And I don't think many guys can say that. I finished my career joining SAB 3 times and leaving them 3 times. So just
okay, and Bavaria, was that when... Who owned Bavaria when you...
That was the Swinkles family. So
okay.
That
so the current owners.
Yeah. Listen, that was it was... I missed the beer business. I came back, I was without a job for a while, but did some consulting work here and there, but I missed the beer industry, so I was fortunate enough to get that. And I think I worked for Bavaria for 4 or 5 years.
That long?
Yeah. And that was the time that my kids were born, so it was a great time for us to be in South Africa.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the exposure to a small family business as opposed to a big corporate.
And by small you mean, I think they have 5,000 employees.
Yeah, but not in South Africa. Not in the South African sphere.
Yeah. What was the market like then? I mean, what year was that? Can you remember?
That was 2004-ish,
Okay. 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
That's a long time ago, yeah.
So the market was completely different then.
So that was, really, I actually never worked in South Africa. I had those 2 years with SAB as a rep, and then and the 4 years then with Bavaria. But I didn't really know the South African market that well. And we were up against it. Don't know if you remember, but our brands were small. It was relatively unknown. Here in KZN, we had some franchise, but in the rest of the country, it was relatively small. So we had a big drive at the time to get into the key accounts, a big off-premise drive. And I think we were fairly successful. And I think the secret weapon there for us was the Bavaria non-alcoholic. It's a great brand, and
that was imported.
It was imported.
Well, was the brewery still going at the time when you worked there?
Yeah, we brewed the Bavaria Draft and the premium Bavaria Premium, I think it was. Yeah,
in Centurion.
Yes. But a lot of my effort went into making sure that we get ship Bavaria non-alcoholic into Cape Town. We shipped some containers into PE and Durban direct, so that cutting down on the cost, transporting just from Durban to Pretoria and then back down again. So
I think people forget how long Bavaria non-alcoholic has been on the market.
Yeah.
So that's 15 years.
Yes, and it's during our time that we got into Woolies and those those key accounts where I still see it, it's still doing very well.
And if you think, I started with Bavaria in 94, so that's 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And we built quite a strong following in KZN on the back of the draft, and especially the light.
Yes.
The light we did extremely well. And that was mainly because they had a zero tolerance to drinking and driving in KZN. And I think the Bavaria light did much better than the lager.
And it was actually light in alcohol, unlike at the time. I don't think there were any other beers that were actually light in alcohol on the market.
Windhoek Light was there.
Okay, one other then. But it wasn't it was a bit ahead of its time, I think, the Bavaria Light.
Yeah. Okay, and then you lasted there for 4 years, 5 years, and then...
Then I got a call from SAB again and say, they were looking at, again, for a sales development manager for Africa. And I said, well, I've been there, done that, so... and I was fortunate enough to get that job. So I moved from Durban back to Johannesburg to join the head office there, and spent 11 months doing sales development across Africa again, where I mostly worked on the sales blueprint for Africa. What does sales look like in Africa, and with all best practice, in one bundle. So that was a great project, and I loved it. But it was only 11 months, and then I got the phone call to ask if I want to go and join the business in South Sudan for SAB.
Okay, tell us about South Sudan, because that's not a holiday destination.
No, it's not a holiday destination. And my philosophy has always been, it's all of us, me and my wife and the kids, or none of us. So
by then you had 2 kids?
I had 2 kids. They were aged. One wife. I'm glad to say that I still have that wife. But, the kids at the time were, they were 1 and 3 or something like that.
Okay, but fortunately in South Sudan there's a Woolies and...
Yeah, but that is as rough as you can get. It is the hardest place I've ever lived. I think I underestimated really how, not only how difficult it would be to live there, but also how dangerous it is. I moved there at the time of independence. I was lucky enough to be there on Independence Day when they seceded from Sudan, which was an amazing experience, that unbridled joy, of the South Sudanese to be in charge of their own destiny. And the country was full of hope. And we all hoped that it would turn out well. It didn't turn out that way. We had a brewery there.
So a country with hope needs a brewery.
You cannot have a country without a brewery. You don't forget airlines, forget all that. You need a brewery, my friend. We were in the beer category, spirits, water, and soft drinks. So it was a multi-beverage portfolio that we had there. That place was challenging. We had to generate our own electricity. We had the biggest electricity plant in the country. We didn't have a single tar road when I arrived there. Maybe 2-3 kilometers in town. That was it for the entire country. There was one bridge over the River Nile. We had to pump water about 2-3 kilometers from the Nile to the brewery. We used 18,000 liters of diesel daily to generate electricity for the plant. So it was a difficult environment to operate in.
And how far is it from the coast?
No. It's so there is no coast. You have to go through either Kenya or Sudan, to Port Sudan. But that's more than 1,000 kilometers north by far. Yeah, far. There's no access to the coast. So we had to import every single thing, and it was the country was unsafe. So hearing gunfires or gun battles, it was not unusual. So. And
how long did you stay there?
We stayed there for almost 3 years.
Okay, until there was a...
Yeah, so we were unfortunately caught there in the first big civil war in South Sudan. So we were trapped in the brewery for a week. Beer trucks in front of the gate, tank battles just beyond the gates and the fence. Full-on gun battles next to the house, So that was scary. My kids were still there, and they were tiny, and my wife. And we had no cell phone. They switched off cell phone networks. That was a scary 3 or 4 days, you can imagine. But like South Africans do, we organized a braai, have a couple of beers, and you sit it out, It was fairly tense, yeah.
And how many South Africans were there?
No, we were quite a bunch. I would say probably 10, 15 of us, and then a number of Kenyans and Ugandans that worked at the plant. And we had 600 employees. The brewery was labor intensive. So after 4 or 5 days of fighting, eventually SAB organized they opened the airport, took the tanks off the runway, and SAB sent in an evacuation plane, and eventually all the nations were scrambling to get out, and we managed to get on the flight back to SA, which was a relief.
And that was the last time you were there?
That was the last time I was there. Moved from there to Botswana for SAB, which you cannot get two countries more different on the continent.
Okay, but tell us about South Sudan. What is the history there? The fighting and
so. Listen, it's a tragic country. The North, when it was still part of Sudan, the North spent no money on development in the South, none whatsoever. It is an amazing divide, Sudan. It's the divide of Christian, Muslim.
Okay.
It's the divide of Arab Africa and Black Africa. So all that in one country. And the ruling Arab class didn't spend a cent in the South. So south of Sudan was completely undeveloped, but as in properly, there's nothing there. No schools, no roads, no infrastructure, nothing. But you go to Khartoum, there's 6-7 amazing bridges over the Nile and 5-lane highways, but in the south there's nothing. And then, so apart from that, there's also the tribal animosity in South Sudan. So, for instance, there were, like the one currently between the Nuer and the Dinka, the two biggest tribes in South Sudan, and that was actually that civil war that started when we were there was between the two main tribes. You know?
Okay.
So it's a sad state of affairs. Let's be honest. You know?
And is the brewery still going now?
The brewery is there, but it does not belong to SAB anymore. They sold it. You know, Olga, the issue there was not that we couldn't sell. We could sell lots of beer, soft drinks, water. That was not the problem. It was that you could not convert your local currency into hard currency. So you could not pay your suppliers. And, you know, eventually you sit on a mountain of money in South Sudanese pounds, but you can do nothing with it. And your supplier is saying, listen, we're just going to stop supplying you if you don't pay us. So that was the death of that brewery. It was not the fact that we couldn't sell. It was not the war. It was the fact that we couldn't get our money out.
And how many salespeople did you employ there?
I had 3 sales teams, about 20 salespeople.
Okay.
Yeah. They're all on motorbikes.
Lovely. That's actually a clever idea, hey?
Yeah, it worked there. You know, it was rough, but that they could manage the roads. You can't have a car there.
Yeah, and deliveries, 4x4 trucks.
We had big 4x4 DAFs and even that couldn't always, you know, cope with the road infrastructure. We had in the wet season sometimes trucks stuck in the mud for 3-4 months. You know, you could not get to them. You could do nothing. They would sit there with the beer. And then in the dry season, you hope that the truck can get out again. So it was, we distributed beer for probably 700 k's on the Nile. And that was probably the most reliable distribution route in the entire country.
With ships.
Yeah.
What do you call
barges,
them? Barges. Wow, interesting.
Yeah. So that was it was a very interesting place to live in. Yeah.
And have you got photos of those barges?
Yeah, I can find photos.
It would be interesting to see that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting place to live, yeah.
Yeah, and then, so you say you stayed there for 3-4 years?
Yeah, 3 years, yeah.
3 years.
Short of 3 years. Yeah.
Okay. And then to Botswana.
To Botswana, which was a big or steep learning curve for me, because I then joined, it was still part of SAB, but I looked after the traditional African beer portfolio. So Chibuku, for those that know the brand name.
It's a well-known brand, isn't it?
Yes. So I knew nothing about traditional African beer. I made I made the mistake of thinking that it's easy.
Yeah.
Because it's a cheap beer. It doesn't look like it's difficult to sell, but I didn't fully appreciate that we're working with a 5-day shelf life beer product, and that consumers prefer day 3 beer. So the fact that you have day 1 and 2 beer in an outlet means nothing. That's equivalent to out of stock. If you don't have day 3 and 4 beer, then you're not in the business. And trying to manage that was the steepest learning curve of my working career, for sure.
So you got to explain that. So the beer lasts for 5 days.
Yes.
The consumer doesn't drink it on day 1 or on day 2.
Day 2, no, because then it's too sweet. Because there's too much sugar in. It's still fermenting.
So it's still fermenting in the box.
Yes, and day 3, 4 they'll drink. They're happy, and day 5 it expires. So you're lucky if somebody drinks it on day 5. But so you literally have to keep the pipeline full with day 3 and 4 beer.
So where is that day 1 and 2 beer? Is it in the shop or is it in your warehouse?
No, it must be it's either it cannot be in the warehouse. So the warehouse hardly keeps stock. It must be on the truck, on the way to the customer, or at the customer on day 2. So you must keep that pipeline full. So we worked 365, 7 days a week, Christmas, New Year. The delivery vehicles never stop. Because if you miss one day, then your pipeline's got a gap in it, and eventually you're going to run out of day 3 beer.
So how long does it take to get the beer from the factory into the customer?
I think our furthest supply route was from Francistown, where we had a brewery, to Mahun in the north, and so. But the primary distribution truck left every night. To
little depots.
To the depot in Maun for the next day's distribution. So it gets tight. At the height of summer, it is the expiry date is actually not 5 days. It makes it a bit shorter. It
It's
could be 4.
4. Yeah.
Yeah. So because then the beer ferments, obviously it's too hot.
Yeah.
In winter, to be honest, we had 7 or 8 days to work with.
Okay.
And then what you see is in winter your volume actually goes up because you can actually work on a little bit of stock pressure. Where in summer you always walk the line of out of stock.
Okay.
That you must always be
Just too little.
yeah. Otherwise you're right off stock. So it
Yeah.
is,
And who writes it off? The manufacturer.
It is the understanding in the industry is that if you get stuck with expired stock, that's your problem. Okay, we commit to minimum 3 deliveries a week to help you keep your pipeline full. So you don't. There's no need for you to overstock.
Okay.
So if you do actually overstock,
It's your fault.
It's your fault. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you make that beer?
Well, it's maize. It's a fairly simple process. You cook your maize.
Porridge.
Make porridge with sorghum malt and pitch your yeast, and there you go. And in the box and off, and there you go.
And so the biggest competition is probably homebrew.
Homebrew in Botswana. So in Botswana we didn't have an official opposition, but homebrew was the main opposition. Yeah,
because they make it themselves, the customers.
Exactly. But homebrew was only a factor if our distribution was poor.
Okay.
Because of
convenience.
Because of the convenience, yes.
And you don't want to cook it today and only drink it in 3 days.
3 days. So the better our distribution was and the better we kept the pipeline full, the less the impact of homebrew. Wherever homebrew was an issue, I knew that our distribution was the cause. So it was not, homebrew was not really a problem unless we were not on top of our game.
Yeah. And is that where you told me there was quite SAB had a powder business as well?
Yes. So the beer powder product, or beer powder, is a phenomenal product. Because you don't sit with the expiry problem.
Okay.
And you cook, you brew today, drink tomorrow. So, or you can start drinking tomorrow, of course. And that helped us a lot with getting into the deep rural areas like the Galagadi area, north of Maun. There are certain areas where and that could compete directly with homebrew. And because it really makes it easy to brew the homebrew.
So what did that little kit consist of? Was it just the
actual plant?
No, the product that you sold.
No, the beer powder is it's the maize in a powder format with the sorghum malt powder format with yeast pitched in. All you had to do was add cold water and let it stand overnight. You don't have to boil it. You don't have to do any of that. So it is a simple process. We've done all that for you. So that was a real competitor for homebrew.
And was it on the same truck?
No, that went through the grocery channels. Okay,
FMCG.
Yes. So you'll put that next to sugar, maize meal, and all that. So that we never sold that on the beer side of any of the businesses, and it also didn't go with our trucks because then it would compete directly. The intention was never to convert our convenience pack consumers to homebrew. It was to compete with the homebrew guy, then to convert them to Chibuku beer powder.
Okay, so maybe this is an offline question, but something like King Corn, is that similar or is that?
No, it's not similar. King Corn is is traditional beer. You cook that. It's almost a 3-day preparation process.
Okay.
Yes. So that it's sort of similar, but with that you still have to add sugar. You still have to add the yeast. You still have to add. So that is a rather complicated and long process. Where our product was 1 day process.
And the powder, is that available anywhere else in the world?
Yeah, it's all over. So it's very big in South Africa. If you go to the Eastern Cape, you'll see pallets. And
what's it called
pallets, I can't remember now, but there's quite a number. Yeah.
So
it's a big product.
And the brewery then runs every day,
flat out. It never stops. Yeah. Fortunately, we had 2 breweries there. So I don't know if you remember the tremendous drought in Botswana. So we couldn't brew in gabs. There was just no water. So the brewery in Francistown had to double up and supply. So we lost volume there. That unfortunately, supply lines were long. The brewery didn't have the capacity. But at least you could see us through, But that problem was resolved. So the breweries went flat out. No, there was no stopping.
Mm. And you could sell everything you made, or did you?
There's a very involved forecasting process. So you never brew. Okay. You brew on expected forecast, and you make that forecast daily. So you just we brew today for what we say we'll sell tomorrow. So you don't brew up. You never keep stock.
So it's a data-driven business.
100%. And your floor stock is maybe half a day. So you literally go from the packaging line onto the trucks and out. You don't keep stock on the floor. That's never the intention of this business. So you'll sell, a business that sells 1 million hectoliters will hardly have warehousing. It's not how it works.
Yeah.
Beer goes on the truck to the customer.
And the beer business in Botswana? The normal beer?
Yeah.
Clear beer?
Yeah, no, it did well. It was maintaining, it is also about a 600,000 hectoliter business. Mainly South African brands, apart from St. Louis, which is the national brand in Botswana.
But completely 100% SAB?
SAB, yeah.
Yeah.
The rest all imported, our position imported.
Is there a little bit of Windhoek?
Yeah, all the brands that you find in South Africa, you'll find there, but at a price. So I think the big advantage was that we brewed locally, so a little bit of a price advantage. Yeah.
Okay, and how long did you stay in Botswana?
3.5 years.
Until
the SAB InBev takeover, yeah. And then we all got retrenched, and it was a good time for us to move back to Durban, because then my oldest son was just about to go to high school. So
to high school?
Well, that happens next year, but at least it gives him a bit of a stable base to go,
And schooling in Botswana, was that homeschooling or was it school?
The kids were in Thornhill Primary, absolutely a brilliant school. Yeah. We loved it there. Botswana is an amazing country.
The expat life, eh?
Yeah, the expat life. And it came to an abrupt end, Holger, but we expected that. It was, to be honest, part of our plan. We didn't want the kids to board, so we were going to move back anyway, but we came back 2 years earlier than planned, yeah. Because
of AB InBev?
Yes.
Okay. And now you're back in Durban. Mm-hmm. And it's been
2 years now, and
2 exciting years.
Yes, I was nervous because at first because obviously
because there's no jobs in Durban.
There's no job in Durban, but it's still a great place to live. So it was our choice to move to Durban without work rather than maybe say Joburg, where we could find something to do. We wanted to move back here. Yes, and then
the exciting
a couple of exciting things happened then. What happened with the SAB Miller AB InBev takeover is that a lot of the expats in Africa got retrenched and they scattered all over the world to join other brewery or beverage companies. So as I landed in Durban, I got a phone call from an ex-colleague of mine that worked for Awash Wines in Ethiopia, and he wanted some sales development done with his team. And I said, yeah, of course, I'll go. So I had about 6 visits up, or 6 weeks worth of work up in Ethiopia.
And if you say wine, that's grapes.
Yeah, it's grapes, but it's quite interesting. They make their wine from raisins. So yes, they have their own farms in Ethiopia.
Wine farms.
Yes, wine farms. So that's the Italian influence, from the time when the Italians were there. Okay. So, but they don't make their wine from grapes. They make it from their own raisins. Very sweet, and it's a cultural drink. So this is not something I understood when I got there, because wine, but it's a sweet wine that they make a type of sangria with. Mix it with lemonade and half a beer, and everybody drinks that. It's not a small product. It is.
What
massive.
Is it called?
Yes. I can't remember what the. I can't remember. Yeah, but fantastic. So it is not a difficult thing to sell because people want it. Again, I come back to my availability and price, and that was your determining factor. Yeah. So make sure it's available, make sure it's visible, and make sure that you sell it at the right price, and you'll be successful. So it was just to get that discipline into the sales team.
But in what format is this now? Is it in 750 ml bottles?
750 ml
like
bottles. Does
it look like our wine?
It looks like our wine.
And then they mix it afterwards.
Yes, they get the wine bottle, they get a jug, and in the jug then they mix it to make the sangria type product, and then people sit and enjoy that. It is actually quite amazing, and it tastes very nice. On its own, the wine is not great, but as a mix.
Yeah. So the alcohol is in the wine, and the other stuff gives it.
And a little bit of beer that they add. So remember, it's beer, wine, and lemonade.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then you have that with raw meat, and then Bob's your uncle.
Raw meat.
Yeah, that's what the guys eat up there in mass. So
explain that.
No, that's culturally, Ethiopians love raw meat.
We also eat raw meat. It's called biltong.
Yeah, but not dried, my friend. That is, the carcass hangs there, and they cut the raw meat off. And they cut the fat off, and present it nicely on the plate. And you dip it in a sauce, and you eat with your sangria type. Yeah.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah. So it was fascinating. What an amazing country! What amazing ancient culture that they're very proud of. And they have to be proud of it. It's awesome. It was an eye opener.
I know one of our craft brewers always goes up to Ethiopia, where it's from Diamonds in Centurion, and he also makes the local the beer.
Yes.
Taj, I think they call it.
Okay, yes.
And he's I don't know, he does some consulting.
With the honey. Yes.
He does some consulting in Ethiopia, but he brews this thing locally, and he's got his little market in Joburg where the Ethiopians live, and he supplies them with
the Taj it's nice. It kicks like a donkey, my friend, but it tastes very nice. Yeah.
Okay, so
interestingly enough, Olga, there's quite a vibrant traditional beer, segment in Ethiopia too. I'm not saying that beer tastes very nice. It does not taste nice at all, but it's there. Can you believe it? Yeah.
So, what do you mean traditional beer?
Like Chibuku type, yeah. So there is a market there, but it's all homebrew driven at the moment. There's no official, traditional beer business there.
Okay, no branded business.
No branded business.
But you said interesting that there were a lot of breweries in Botswana. I mean, in Ethiopia.
Ethiopia, yeah. Almost all the big brewers in the world, are present there because it's the most populous landlocked country in the world. I didn't know that. So there's yes, Ethiopia has got a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they don't mind drinking alcohol. So you want to be there. It's an extremely competitive market, and in my opinion, a very difficult place to operate because the brewers fight on price rather than on brand equity, which makes it difficult to establish a brand. If you don't, basically the lowest common denominator is price, and that's what they fight on. So it's not a market that I would want to join, for instance. Yeah.
So interesting. I was approached by Andre Passman, and he says, "Don't you know a retired beer guy? We want to establish a draft beer business in Ethiopia." And I said, "Oh, that sounds interesting, but it was only for your contract, and what do you do afterwards?"
Correct. But listen, if you've got nothing to do for the year, go there because it's a great country to experience, and definitely worth going. But extremely competitive beer business. Very, very much.
So one of the brewers, I don't know what it's called, is owned by the Swinkels, the Bavaria breweries.
Yes.
And then Vasari Beverages also owns a brewery, and that's Dashin, I think.
Yes. So Dashin is big. The Swinkels family, their brand's Habesha. Okay. And it's a fantastic brand name. They really hit it on the nail there. The Ethiopians associate with Habesha. That's the little, it's like a little boy with the little afro. That's their logo, and you see that all over Ethiopia. So they really nailed it from a naming point of view and a logo. And the brand's doing extremely well. It's good beer. Well, all the beer in Ethiopia I can tell you, is great quality. But their beer is also fantastic. Yeah.
Okay, but what for me is interesting that Vasari, which is owned by Vivian Immerman. And now Vivian is a South African who now also owns KWV, or his company, and they say he's the second wealthiest beverage entrepreneur or liquor entrepreneur in the UK.
Wow.
He bought White and Mackay and sold it for a fortune, one of the big Scottish distillers. And he also owns KWV now. And obviously he's invested in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
I think they also have bakeries and other food products in food companies in Ethiopia.
Yeah, I've been to their brewery, or one of their breweries there, and they run a good business.
Okay, and then how long were you involved in Ethiopia? You said you did a couple of trips, so
I
it
did
wasn't
a few trips for Awash, and then I also did some work for Zebedar, which is one of the smaller breweries owned by a Belgian family. They've since been bought out by one of the big brewers. But Zebedar was also a nice brand, a beautiful brewery, about 150 k's out of Addis. And I did some field work with their sales team, which was great.
and the product, normal lager or Belgian beer?
No, normal lager. So that seems to be what
the African
goes
beer.
down well. Yes, like standard middle of the range, lager. But again, great quality. Good brand. There's nothing great. It's just a very competitive market, and I think for a smaller brewer to survive will be difficult in Ethiopia. The big guys will eat you up. And then my Ethiopian adventure came to an end. But not long after that, I got a phone call from Cambodia.
So who's in Cambodia that knows you?
Another ex-SAB
Scattered
director that ended up there, and they needed some sales development done for their sales team.
So explain to us where Cambodia is.
So Cambodia is Southeast Asia. It's just south of Vietnam, Thailand, Laos. So
on the coast, or is everything on
the coast? But not as long as some of the other Asian countries or East Asian countries. A very active beer market, per capita consumption of over 60 liters, which I wasn't prepared, I didn't expect that. So massive family business, 5 million hectoliter plus.
A local family.
They're really into construction, cement production, banking. The beer business is just an afterthought, and they have a 5 million hectoliter business.
So to put 5 million hectoliters into perspective, we Googled what Heineken is.
Heineken, yeah. And
so Sedibeng in South Africa is?
Their capacity is 7.5 million hectoliters.
So that's the capacity
of the brewery. These guys are selling 5 million hectoliters, and it's one family owns it.
Yeah. And the surname is not Heineken.
It's not Heineken.
Somebody that we're not
familiar with. Yeah. So, Jorge, that was an eye-opener. The East Asian market is extremely competitive. So this brewery sells water, soft drinks, energy drinks, juice, and beer. But
any brands that we know?
No, you won't. It's all local.
So I think we only know Bintang or something like that.
No, it's all locally launched Cambodian brands. But 95% of their volume still comes from one brand, one pack. It's Cambodia Lager, and it's in a can. So
wow.
Interesting. Yeah.
And the competition?
Everybody's there. Heineken's there. Carlsberg's there. Guinness. So everybody.
Okay.
They're the biggest lager producers, but I think their share is 35% of the market. So, the rest then all have smaller share, but it's extremely competitive, and you also compete against imported products from Thailand and so forth. So it's a competitive market, by a fantastic world-class brewery, excellent quality, really good brand and brand name strong.
And how did you end up there? Oh, you got a call.
Yes, got a call from
the Old Boys Club.
From the Old Boys Club, yeah. So, I did about a year's work. I did 8 or 9 trips to Cambodia, really worked with the reps. We did some theory, but a lot of my time there was spent working with the guys in the field, again, working on simple things like visibility, availability, price, building that relationship, getting the call schedules right. Amazing business, yeah. It was a privilege to go there.
Yeah, so the more we talk, the more I realize this Old Boys Club is working.
Its work is active. Yeah.
Have you got a WhatsApp group?
No, we're not there yet. We're working on it.
Yeah. So I just remember now that your Old Boys Club also worked when you were at Bavaria. because you had a
Yes.
story. You wanted
Yeah.
to paddle across one of the lakes you mentioned earlier, Lake Tanganyika, was it?
Yeah, so it was a dream of mine. So Lake Tanganyika is the longest lake in the world, and it's
In the world?
in the world, yeah. So
Okay.
it's never been kayaked before 2008, and I wanted to be the first one to do it. So me and my friend Morne decided to go for it again over a couple of beers and a braai. He said, okay,
Well, it's a much better idea than starting a brewery over a couple of beers.
No, 100%. Well, my wife wouldn't agree, but anyway, so eventually
What year was this?
It was 2008.
2008.
When I worked for Bavaria, yeah.
Yeah.
And then Holger, we managed to get a kayak sponsored by Paddlejak, Johan Lewitz down in Houtbaai, and he got it was a double kayak that he made for us, Paddlejak Swift, and he got it up to Joburg, but we had to still get it from Johannesburg to the southern end of Lake Tanganyika, which is 1,000 kilometers north of Lusaka. So it's very far from Johannesburg, and that's where the beer network kicked in.
Yes, the Old Boys Club.
Yes, because I asked our transporter at the time that took beer to the southern Congo. I forgot their name now. Moody Blues. So I asked the guys from Moody Blues, guys, can you perhaps take this kayak and drop it for us in Lusaka? And they said, yeah, no worries. They put it on the beer truck.
How did it get to Lusaka?
No, on the Bavaria beer that we exported to the southern Congo. So he was on his way to Lubumbashi and he had to pass Lusaka. So I said to him, Sakis, you're going to go past Lusaka. Just drop it for me at SAB there. And he said, yeah, no problems. And I phoned my friends at SAB and said, will you receive a kayak for me? I said, yeah. So the kayak made it to Lusaka for free. And then I phoned my friend at Zambian Breweries, Ant Glenda, and I said, Ant, don't you have a distributor up north there near Kasama? He said, yeah, no problem, we've got. I said, can you take my kayak on the beer truck? He said, yeah, no problem. So the kayak would load it on the beer truck and made it about 1,000 kilometers to Kasama, which is still 100 km from Lake Tanganyika. And when we and Morna arrived there by bus one morning, the kayak was there. The first time we saw it, kayak was there at the distributor. And we waited there from 4 in the morning. He opened, he gave us the kayak, and I phoned the rep because I trained all the reps. I said, where are you calling today? He said, no, you're in Kasama. I said, no, you're not. You're going to Lake Tanganyika. So bring that bakkie of yours. So he brought his bakkie, put the kayak on the back of the bakkie, strapped it in, and that's how we made the last 100 k's to the lake. So we got it from Joburg to Lake Tanganyika on the back of beer trucks for free.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And how did you get there?
We flew to Lusaka, took a local bus to Kasama, and on the back of the rep's bakkie for the last 100 kilometers. And then Holger, we jumped in the kayak and kayaked 800 kilometers for over the next 4 weeks.
So I'm not sure what is more interesting, getting there or the...
No, the getting there is a great story to tell. The next 25 days is just kayaking like hell, to get to Burundi. So we kayaked through Zambia, through Tanzania.
Did you have to get stamps on your passport?
Yes. Somehow we managed to find, immigration officials in their huts or under, the mango tree or crossing from Tanzania to Burundi. We asked the Tanzanian immigration guys, where do we find the Burundian immigration guy? They said, no, under the second mango tree. And truth Bob, he was sitting there on his chair under the second mango tree, and he stamped our passports, and there we were. And then a month later, we kayaked into Bujumbura and ran out of lake. And then we were the first guys to have kayaked the world's longest lake.
But was there a beer rep waiting for you there?
There wasn't a beer rep waiting for us. As a matter of fact, it was the biggest anticlimax ever because there was nobody waiting for us. But we ended up at a hotel called Nyanzalak, and they had plenty of beer. So we bought our own Primus and celebrated. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful! So, and what did you eat?
We carried a lot of food with us,
which also came on the beer truck.
No, that we came with us in our backpacks. We actually loaded the kayak only on the shores before we started, and then. But I also bought fish and tomatoes and onions and stuff from the local villages. Mostly we avoided them because you get absolutely swamped. So we tried to, get little secluded beaches to sleep on. Lake Tanganyika is very sparsely populated. Hardly anybody lives there, so it's quiet. You know.
My daughter wanted to know if there were crocodiles.
Plenty, and lots of hippos. Yes, and massive waves. It's a big lake. The lake is 50 kilometers wide on average. The shoreline was 800 kilometers, and then and it's 1.4 kilometers deep. So it is.
So no falling off.
It's a serious piece of water, and it's big.
So tell us a little bit about the challenges on the water.
Size of the waves. Okay.
Yeah.
We had 3 meter swells with white water breaking over us. Wind was a serious problem, especially in the afternoons. And then I think, Holger, the biggest challenge was probably the mental issue of spending, 4 weeks with one other guy.
Yeah.
And no other source of conversation, because physically, week 1 was difficult, but after that you used to it, and you kayak 8 hours a day. It's repetitive. So you every day, and I think that was the real challenge, was the mental challenge of getting up every day, kayaking for 8 hours, and going to sleep again, and you never try sand in your food, sand in your sleeping bag. Those small things. It's not because for the rest, it's something everybody can do. It's just the mental part of it is the difficult one.
And nobody's ever done it before.
Yeah. And then, we were nervous going into Burundi. The country was still at civil war. So the last 5 days we had to kayak through a war-torn country, and that we were very nervous. We had a long discussion sitting at the border. So the previous expedition that didn't complete actually decided not to go into Burundi. Otherwise, they would have done it. It is just... So that was very scary. As a matter of fact, 3 of us finished. A third guy joined us on the Burundi border from the previous expedition to kayak the last 5 days. So,
and who was that?
Was it Brent Wibberley? So Brent Wibberley, myself, and Morne Smith were the
three. South African guy.
Yeah,
okay.
South Africans.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what happens when you land in Burundi? You say nobody's waiting there.
Nobody's waiting there. But fortunately, I had some. So remember, we did live in Mwanza. So friends from Mwanza drove all the way to Burundi to pick us up and take us back to Mwanza, and we flew back.
Remind me where that was. Which country?
Tanzania.
That's
Tanzania. Yeah.
And how far was that?
No, that's a long drive. That's also over 1,000 kilometers.
Okay.
But they were quite keen to see us finish. So, okay, it's a long story, but they were actually in Burundi, and all the expats came out in their boats to meet us on a sandy island just outside Burundi. And we all had breakfast there. And then they were supposed to meet us there as a welcoming party when we finished, but they all got stuck in their beers and they forgot. They lost track of time. So when we finished, we were the only ones on the beach. We had to wait for them to come and take pictures of us. So the guys picked us up there and drove us all the way back to TZ. And we flew back.
Yeah, sounds like lovely stories.
Yeah, it's all good memories.
And what are your plans now? What are you doing now?
Okay, I'm still consulting, but I signed a contract with United National Breweries to look after KZN, the KZN sales.
Which is Ijuba.
Ijuba, yeah, traditional African beer, and Mageu on the non-alcoholic side. It's a business with amazing potential. And again, it's just getting the basics in place, which we're working on now. So for the next 6-7 months, I'm dedicated to make that business in KZN work. Yeah.
And why a 6-month contract?
It could be longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that from your side or from their side?
I think it's by mutual agreement.
Okay.
I like the flexibility of being a consultant, but I also love getting stuck in. So it works for both parties. Yeah.
And tell us about that business, because for us, I can remember as a child, my friend had a trading store, and the Ijuba truck would arrive, and it was in those days we sold those 25-liter drums mainly.
Yeah.
And obviously the ready to drink or the small 1-liter packs.
Yes. Yeah.
And there was a story you had to make a hole in the pack. Do you still do that?
I'm not so sure about that piece, but
there was a nail just for making holes.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's probably not necessary. There should be a hole in for the fermentation, for breathing. Nothing much has changed, Holger, since those days. Volume has gone down a little bit. The business has been consolidated. They closed some breweries, including the big one in Kangela, which came with its challenges now for us from a long supply line.
So where do you get your stock from?
Beer from either from Potchefstroom or from Pretoria.
And it's also 7 days, or
well, if you're lucky, you've got 7 days. In summer, we were working with 4 or 5 days, and that's the real challenge. So how do you sell beer in Zululand that came from Pretoria, and you only have 4 days from brewing to expiry? So in summer. So
all the craft brewers must stop whining.
They must stop whining. That if they really want to see how difficult business, let them come and join our business in summer.
But there's a demand for your product.
There's a demand, Olga. Of course, we can only deliver to licensed outlets. So the challenge is really to get as close to your consumer as possible with a short, and then make sure that your product's ready to drink when they get it. So
that must have changed, because the trading store was. My friend had a trading store, not a bottle store. And in those days, they could have, I guess it was a different license. They could have a sorghum license for a trading store.
Yeah, but we have to stay on the right side of the law. So,
so there's no difference. I guess now only bottle stores can sell it.
Bottle stores and taverns and so forth.
Yeah.
And in rural areas where those are few and far between, but there's a demand for the product, that's where the complexity comes in. So you don't have days to work with, but you need to penetrate rural areas. So it's a little bit complicated from that point of view. It's a distribution business, Olga. How do you get it as close to the final consumer with the time frame that you've got? And that's where the complexity lies. Yeah. Fantastic.
Okay. And how much competition have you
got? There's no real competition on the packaged beer side, but on the beer powder side, we've got competition. So, and remember, I said earlier in our conversation, if your distribution's poor, then beer powder will take over that market, because the demand is there. People will drink traditional beer. If it's packaged beer or not, that is up to us.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that our supply is up to scratch, so that we don't have to compete with beer powder.
Yeah, give us an idea of the size of this business. Is it a big business?
It's a big business.
Okay.
We've got hundreds of trucks. Primary distribution trucks run day and night. You can imagine, from the brewery to supply. We will receive 3 interlinks here in KwaMashu a day. And that will have to be redistributed and sold.
And quite far, because if you're going from KwaMashu all the way to Zululand.
All the way to Zululand, in Gwavuma, right up near Kosi
on the
Bay.
flats.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's far. We cover the whole of South Africa.
Every day.
Yeah, every day.
Yeah, so it's like the bread guys, except you don't have a bakery in every town.
Correct. That is exactly like that.
Yeah. Interesting business, and how you've come back to that sorghum, how it's you obviously got this gig because you had some experience.
Yes, but there's something about the sorghum business, Olga, that's very interesting. It gets into your blood. I think it's the complexity of it. So if I look back at the clear beer business now, it is simplistic. You've got 6 months or 4 months shelf life to work with. You can create stock pressure. But with our business, it's not. You must be hands-on. It is day to day, and it's the energy in the system is fantastic. It is far more vibrant than the clear beer business, because you have to be so hands-on. You have to live and breathe this product. Otherwise, you will either run out of stock or you have expired stock. So, and I like that energy.
It's a different energy.
Yeah.
And then you have another product, which reminds me of my days when I was about 13 years old. We used to, in rural KwaZulu Natal, we have our tennis coaching on a Friday afternoon, and on the way to the tennis courts or the tennis club, there was a little tea room, and we'd buy banana macheo.
Yes.
And that was our lunch.
Yeah.
No, you also sell that.
Yeah, so we sell macheo as part of our portfolio. It's currently not a big part, but it's a product that I think's got amazing legs. The fact that it's non-alcoholic, so it just opens up every grocery that you go past. It's a food supplement.
Yeah.
So it's great for rural kids. It's available got different flavors. So I'm very excited about the Macheo part of our business.
Okay. Yeah, for me that was always a lovely snack. I mean, everybody else, if you didn't grow up with it, it wasn't something that you would
it's funny.
drink.
My kids don't like it. I love it. I still drink it regularly, when I do trade visits. But my kids are not that into it. But for me, it's the equivalent of yogi sip, but just maize based, I guess you like it or you don't, but I do.
Yeah. Well, Louis, thanks for joining me today. And now the listeners will know why I say that you are probably the most traveled beer rep in Africa. You've seen a lot of countries. How many countries have you visited in Africa?
No, 15, 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful stories.
Yeah, Olga, thanks for your time too.
Yeah.
For inviting me.
Lovely. And if you ever, do you still do, obviously you're full-time employed now for these 6 months, and then you still looking for gigs on sales training?
If anybody needs sales development done for their teams, I'm there. I'm hands-on. I love being in the trade. I can help with strategy, anything that, so if you need something done, I'm there.
Yeah, there you go. Louis worked all over the world. Thank you, and good luck with your selling sorghum and machio.
Thanks, Olga.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to our stories here online. In the show notes, you will also find a link where you can subscribe to become part of our community and be notified when we upload our latest content.